Meeting to order, and today, pursuant to we're doing two issues. Pursuant to the order of reference of Monday, October 15th, Bill C-82, which is an act to implement a multilateral convention to implement a tax treaty-related measures to prevent base erosion and profit sharing. And we're also going to deal with the interim estimates under the Department of Finance. And we have with the Parliamentary Secretary, Joe Lightbound, Mr. Rochon, Deputy Minister, Mr. Irwin, Assistant Deputy Minister, Tax Legislation, Ms. Bess, Chief Financial Officer, and Ms. Smith, Senior Director, Tax Treaties. So, Mr. Parliamentary Secretary, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee, for welcoming me here today for the first time that I am appearing before a parliamentary committee, so please be indulgent with
me to speak about Bill C-82. This bill will be an important new tool in the government's arsenal to combat aggressive international tax avoidance. When some Canadians choose not to pay their fair share of taxes, all of us are shortchanged. It means less money for important social programs such as the Canada Child Benefit. It means less money for vital infrastructure such as roads, railways, ports and airports that help us move people and goods to where they need to go safely and on time. It means less money to protect our communities, less money for healthcare. Our government believes that all Canadians deserve to share in the fruits of a strong and vibrant economy. That is why our government takes seriously its responsibility to ensure that Canada's tax system is fair and efficient. Mr. Chair, tax fairness is a cornerstone of our plan to grow a stronger middle class and create economic growth. In each of our government's last three budgets, we've introduced measures to enhance the integrity of Canada's tax system and give Canadians greater confidence that the system is fair for everyone. Thanks to these investments, the Canada Revenue Agency is armed with better tools and better approaches, which are leading to better results. These tools help the CRA collect valuable information and allow its agents to work smarter and more effectively to ensure all Canadians follow the rules. For example, Canada continues to be a member of the expanded Joint International Task Force on Shared Intelligence and Collaboration. This network of 38 countries works closely and actively with other tax administrations to coordinate tax compliance activities across the spectrum of international tax risks. This expertise has allowed the CRA to participate and lead JITSIC expert working groups, including in the development of a strategy to identify and stop promoters of abusive tax schemes. Mr. Chair, Canada has also taken steps to coordinate its criminal investigation by joining Australia, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and the Joint Chiefs of Global Tax Enforcement, J5 group. The J5 will share criminal investigation strategies, intelligence, and conduct joint operations in the fight against those who commit, promote, and enable international tax crimes, money laundering, and cybercrimes. The CRA has also been automatically accessing all international electronic funds transfer of more than $10,000 entering or leaving the country. As of March 31, 2018, teams have analyzed more than 187,000 of these transactions, amounting to more than $177 billion, related to 8 jurisdictions of financial institutions of concern. Reviewing these transfers helps identify transactions in which taxes should potentially have been paid and better risk assess individuals and businesses. Through these efforts, Canada is taking concrete measures to secure tax fairness for Canadians. Our government will continue to work to maintain and improve our enforcement of tax compliance so that we can have a society that works not only for a select few, but for all Canadians. Monsieur le Président, nous prenons aussi des mesures importantes.
We are taking significant measures against third parties to avoid tax. during the past year, some $48 billion it was involved with the implementation of a certain number of statements. So we are able to scrutinize certain bank accounts. So this is a new system that will allow for an exchange of information amongst the parties. This information will allow us to find instances where Canadians hide money to avoid paying tax. We have a team of specialists, special auditors, that will be working in this area. This represents about 150 auditors and some larger number of audits that were carried out. In December 2017, the federal, provincial, and territorial ministers came together to look at the ways to better harmonize the administrative regulatory systems to deal with this. In the Budget Implementation Act, we have modified certain pieces of legislation that will allow for a register that will provide some scrutiny. In addition, the 2018 budget has provided for increased diligence with respect to trusts and to allow for real property, the information to be dealt with. This is something that will be of great importance when there is international money laundering. And we are using this based on what was done in the past.
To better counter a practice known as base erosion and profit shifting, or BEPS. BEPS refers to tax avoidance strategies in which businesses and wealthy individuals use gaps and mismatches in tax rules to avoid tax or to shift profits to low tax or no tax jurisdictions. These strategies make it possible for businesses and wealthy individuals to avoid paying their fair and full share of taxes. This means less money to fund essential services that people depend on. We've worked hard to counter this loss of tax revenue. In particular, I want to highlight our work with our international partners on this front. Mr. Chair, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and G20 member countries collaborated to identify a number of instances in which the terms of current tax treaties are vulnerable to potential abuse. These organizations then developed measures that countries could incorporate into their tax treaties to address these vulnerabilities. Mr. Chair, the fact that it would take an extraordinary amount of time to renegotiate existing tax treaties required a new approach. That new approach is the multilateral convention contained in this bill, otherwise known as the Multilateral Instrument, or MLI. This instrument is the product of a global initiative involving the work of more than 100 countries and jurisdictions, including Canada. The purpose of the multilateral instrument is to allow participating jurisdictions to adopt the OECD and G20 measures to combat BEPS without having to separately renegotiate each of their tax treaties. By implementing the MLI, the government would be taking steps to protect the integrity of our tax system and to guard against the abuse of our tax treaties. Moreover, the implementation of the MLI would demonstrate Canada's willingness, in collaboration with our treaty partners, to take coordinated action to combat international tax avoidance. Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de terminer.
I will conclude by pointing out that the Canadian economy is very well positioned for growth. Canadians have every reason to trust our competitive capacity, but we can always do more. The government maintains its commitment to invest in the middle class and to provide good, well-paying jobs, strong communities, protection of the environment, and a better future for Canadians.
Pay a little bit more so that we could cut taxes for the middle class. On met en œuvre notre plan pour rendre les communautés à travers le pays plus fortes et plus résilientes.
We are putting our plan in action with some significant investments in infrastructure throughout the country. More than 3,000 projects have been approved since 2016. The majority of these projects are underway to help the middle class,
giving 9 out of 10 Canadian families more money to provide for their children, and to ensure that the Canada Child Benefit keeps pace with the cost of living and continues to deliver effective support to those who need it. Our government indexed the Canada Child Benefit as of July 2018, a full 2 years ahead of schedule. A typical middle-class family of 4 is receiving on average about $2,000 more each year as a result of the middle class tax cuts and the Canada Child Benefit when you compare that to 2015. Quand on additionne l'effet des mesures comme l'allocation
When you add all that up and when you take a look at the more generous benefits that have been awarded, we see that there is a growth of, we are lifting some 650,000 Canadians out of poverty over this small period of time. This allows Canadians to have a better life throughout the country. We know that what we are doing is working, and there are more than 8,000 jobs that have been created since 2015. The unemployment rate is at its lowest since 40 years today, and we are amongst the leaders of the G7 in economic growth.
and fair chance at success. To continue in that trajectory of growth, Canada's economic health needs everyone to pay their fair share of taxes. The legislation before us gets Canada closer to meeting that goal. I encourage all members of the committee to support it accordingly. And as this work today includes a focus on the Treasury Board Secretariat supplementary and interim estimates for the Department of Finance, I would be happy to take any questions the members might have about these or the government's plan to improve tax fairness here with the officials from the Department of Finance. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lightbound, and I understand that you are here till 12:30, and then it's officials from 12:30 till 1. Is that correct? Okay. All right, on our list, and starting with the 7-minute round, Mr. Sabara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, everyone. Great to see everybody. Bienvenue, Secretary Parlementaire.
Come to the Parliamentary Secretary to this committee.
And I'll focus my comments and then question on C82, this multilateral convention. So I think it speaks to two things our government has put forward, which is both tax fairness and also tax simplification. And when I think about tax fairness for the residents and the entrepreneurs of my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge, I think about the tax cut on the middle income tax bracket that benefited 9 million Canadians. It's about a $20 billion tax cut over 5 years, which has helped to grow our economy, strengthen the middle class, and help those working hard join the middle class. I think about our small business tax cut, now at 9%, which for firms earning up to $500,000 on the accounting standard, it's about $7,500 per year in savings that they can invest in their businesses. I think of the nearly 13,000 small businesses in the city of Vaughan that employ over 200,000 workers that will benefit both from the small business tax cut, and if they're too large, they'll stay at the corporate income tax rate, which is competitive worldwide, but they'll also benefit from our accelerated investment instrument that we introduced in the following economic statement, which now, in terms of tax fairness, but also tax competitiveness, means that we now have a lower marginal effective tax rate on new investment than the United States by 4%. And what does this mean for Canadians and the residents of my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge? Well, it means almost over 850,000 new jobs have been created in Canada since October of 2015. A majority full-time, a majority private sector, which is near and dear to my heart after 23 years in the private sector. And I think we're on the right path. And when I see a bill like C82, and for background, I sat on the Accounting Standards Board's User Advisory Council for a number of years. So I used accounting statements for many, many years as an analyst both on Bay Street and Wall Street, but a kid who worked at McDonald's growing up and took the bus like many other people did. And I look at C82 and I say our government continues to be on the right track in adopting base erosion, profit shifting, and this multilateral convention. So I can continue speaking about the number of great things our government has done, but now I'll ask my first question. I hear some chirping from the Conservatives, which I guess I'm used to sometimes. I will ask my first question in reference to when the implementation date is of C82, and secondly, how this instrument prevents treaty abuse.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Sorbera, pour votre question et vos commentaires. Je pense qu'il est juste.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sorbora, for your comments and your question. That since 2015, we are in an economic situation that is quite different from what existed before 2015. And what we've done for small and medium-sized businesses and to help the middle class also has contributed to moving us along in the right direction. I certainly echo your observations. I'm in agreement with them. I think this is where C82 is particularly interesting in that it works very well with our G7 partners, with our OECD partners. We are putting forward recommendations. And one of the points of action that was identified was this BEPS, that the base erosion profit sharing, which will be of great help to us. And there is the principal purpose clause, if I'm not mistaken, it will be of help as well, because we can avoid a double taxation in that sense. The main clause is fundamental to C82. We have the MLI before us, which represents yet another step in the right direction to help Canadian business pay their fair share.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Parliamentary Secretary, I would answer in French, but French is very difficult for me. But nonetheless, I'm practicing.
Just a follow-up on C82. The big question the world faces in terms of tax avoidance measures and tax evasion, and I can turn this over to the officials as well. We did hear from Trevor McGowan in the past on C82, and in terms of his comments. And I just want to say, I'd love to get your opinion on just how big of a step this multilateral convention is in terms of, if I can use the word, fighting tax avoidance strategies, in terms of monitoring, and in terms of compliance for realistically multinational corporations and high net worth individuals.
Pour avoir une réponse peut-être plus détaillée, je déférerai peut-être.
I might turn to my colleague for the answer.
Mike's, Brian. You just sit tight and they'll push the right buttons.
Thank you very much. In terms of the impact of this, I think it's directly it's an efficient way of modifying our tax treaties to ensure that inappropriate treaty abuses are constrained. I'd situate that, but in terms of its overall impact, I'd situate that in the context of the so-called BEPS exercise, the base erosion and profit shifting exercise more generally. This is part of the exercise that, or delivery on the exercise that took place between 2013 and 15, and with the report that was ratified by countries including Canada, G20 countries including Canada, and ultimately over 100 countries to make a number of important changes to the international tax architecture. So including this, the treaty abuse provisions principally in this rule, country-by-country reporting for large multinationals to make sure there's better understanding of the allocation of profits and when those profits seem to be allocated in a possibly inappropriate way, bearing further examination, exchange of tax rulings for better information, transfer pricing standards were improved. Those were the minimum standards, if you will, the obligatory changes, and then there were other optional changes as well that were part of that BEPS exercise. So taken as a whole, I think it's very impactful in terms of the international tax system.
Thank you.
Thank you for that color.
Thank you both. Turning to Mr. Polyev, 7 minutes.
Yes, according to public records, the Minister of Finance met with SNC-Lavalin representatives after the... Actually, Mr. Chair, we are. I'm afraid, sorry to disappoint you, but we are getting into it. And I know you want to cover it up, but you're not going to cover it up.
Do you want to...
Actually,
pull the mic.
I have a button here, and you're not going to silence me. My job is to defend the accountability of
use the
Parliament.
rules.
I am not going to be silenced by you or anyone else. You might have
of order.
silenced Jody Wilson-Raybould, but you're not going to silence me.
Mr. Polyev,
Mr. Liberal
you
Chair,
do not have the floor.
I do have the chair, Mr.
You do
Liberal,
not
Mr.
have the
Liberal Chair.
floor.
Mr.
I'm
Liberal
sorry,
Chair,
you do
I do
not
have
have
I do
the
have the floor, and I invite the parliamentary secretary
could I
to
get a technician in here to pull that mic at his mic?
to answer the question.
No.
I invite the parliamentary secretary to answer the
Mr.
question.
Polyev,
You look
we are-
awfully
we are-
afraid, Mr. Chair. You
Listen.
look awfully afraid.
Do you know what?
What are you afraid of?
Listen,
Why can't you have the question?
can you pull his
Why
mic?
can't you have the
Point of
question?
order over here.
Why can't you answer the? Why can't you allow the question?
Because
you're
this-
afraid.
No,
You're not going to silence me.
Mr. Polyev,
You are
would
not
listen for a minute.
going to silence me.
You know, when members don't abide by the rules of committee, Parliament is in trouble. And when the chair,
You're in trouble.
When the chair rules that you are out of order, you are out of order.
I have found you out of order.
I would say to the technicians here, we have to find a way at committees when a parliamentarian is not abiding by the rules of committee, because the chair has the right.
Point of
when
order.
you are not on
Point of order.
the topic to cut you
Point of
off.
order.
I have a
Point of
point of
order.
order over here, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we're here this morning to discuss Bill C-82 and also to look at the pursuant to Standing Order 81, interim estimates 2019-20, votes 1 to 5 under Department of Finance, vote 1 under Financial Transaction Reports Analysis Center of Canada, and vote 1 under Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, referred to the committee on Monday, January 28, 2019. Mr. Chair, I've been on this committee since I was elected and had the privilege to serve the residents of Vaughan Woodbridge. We're here to do the work of our residents. We are here today to analyze and to ask questions from the Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Lightbound, and the officials. Thank you for being here again. And I'm sorry you're having to witness
Point of order.
such behavior.
get
We are
to you.
here to talk about C-82 and this reference. The material that Mr. Polyev has brought up has nothing to do with what we are here to talk about. And I'd like to have a ruling on whether we need to stick to the material or we wander off in some fishing expedition.
Okay, you're getting a little beyond a two. Mr. Polyev, point of order, and then Mr. Massey, point of order.
Ironic, isn't it, that Mr. Sorbera only wants to talk about the tax treaty now? Because a moment ago, he talked about numerous subjects that aren't in the treaty. He talked about unrelated tax policies. He talked about infrastructure projects. He talked about child benefits. He talked about a tax credit for workers. He talked about the small business tax rate. None of those things are in the treaty. And yet, Mr. Chair, you allowed them to be discussed without interruption. So it is very interesting that all of a sudden, now that the subject has become unfavorable to your party, you have slammed your gavel and behaved in a way that helps protect the Prime Minister's office.
What's your point of order?
My point is, if they can talk about things not in the treaty, I can talk about things not in the treaty.
Now, Mr. Sabera, on his comments, talked about issues that are relative to the general finances and the estimates. Mr. Massey.
The only thing I wanted clarification, and I'm a guest to this committee, would be on Bill C-82, is whether international corporations are subjected to that. If that's the case, then I believe it is in order. So that's the only thing that I would suggest that we look at with regards to this process of a difference of opinion on it, is whether the bill actually applies to international corporations doing work abroad.
That's a question you can raise when we get to your time frame, Mr. Massey. The floor is back to you, Mr. Polyev, and please stay on C-82 and the estimates. There is a. I know you're trying to say that that I'm trying to shut this down. No, I'm not. There is a place for those questions to be raised. There's appropriate committees if it goes before it in terms of that issue. I believe the Justice Committee is dealing with this issue. And there's also the House of Commons where you can raise anything that you desire to raise. But this hearing today, as it states on the order, is on C-82 and the estimates estimates are quite broad in terms of the finances of the nations. We have a deputy minister here as well with Mr. Lightbound and other officials. So the floor is yours, and if we can stick to that, it'll be great.
Well, the government and the committee are of the view that deferred prosecution agreements are a matter for this committee. That's why they put them in the budget, and that's why this committee was responsible for approving it. So we are on topic. The question I have here is, what was the purpose of the minister meeting with SNC-Lavalin when he did so? Actually, it's in order because it's my time, and I will ask the questions I choose to ask. I will ask the questions that I choose to ask. Actually, sorry, I have point of order.
No, he has a point.
I'm afraid, Mr. Chair, you're mistaken. I have the floor.
No,
I have a
you
point of order, and my point of order. I have the floor.
Can you cut his mic?
I'm sorry, you can't silence me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
I know
Mr.
you're
Chair.
trying to silence Jody
you're
Wilson
not.
Raybould.
Can you cut his
cannot
mic?
silence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Then you're going to have to get
Let
you're going to have to get the technicians in here to
Get
find
the
a way to
technicians
cut
in
his
here,
mic
and in the
because he's
meantime,
not
we'll
following
try to
rules
get to the truth.
Mr. Regascotis?
Mr. Chair?
Mr.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I know that you're trying to silence any debate on this issue because you don't want the truth to come out.
You do not.
And you have attempted to silence a former minister of the Crown by inappropriately applying solicitor-client privilege. You are not going to silence members of the opposition. You are not going to shut down Parliament and avoid accountability on this issue. It is the job of this committee to hold the government to account on matters of finance. I'm not the one interrupting, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the point of my intervention is this. The government has said that this is a finance. That's why they put it in the budget, and therefore it is the job of the Finance Committee to ask questions of the Finance Minister in relation to his interventions on the matter.
Meeting suspended.
I am asking.
I suspend the meeting.
There you go.
We're not going to have.